To me are the way you swing, if you guys understand, the terminology for that, your dynamics, and your tone. Those are real three fundamental, immediately recognizable components to playing. Now, I'll do some quick demonstration of what I interpret as swing, not to get too deep into technical things, but you have triplets, 1 to 2 to 3, and you have 16ths, 1E and a 2E and a 3. If you're playing very straight, with no dynamics, that's 16ths, that's what we're talking about. And then triplets will be. So then, my favorite part of my favorite musicians is how they bend the lines, if you will, between 16th notes and triplets. So if you're playing, I'll just go through something from a triplet beat into 16ths and sort of the variations in between. Starting with 16ths would be. Right? So there's sort of a lot of in-between information between a straight 16th and a swung 16th. And my favorite drummers, my favorite instrument, musicians, their rhythm has they have a great command and control of that variation in between, So you guys know that we have the term like second line and New Orleans style drumming, right? Which is kind of in the middle, and I'll show you a little bit on the drums to demonstrate that, as well as a piece of this sort of subdivision, because it's all a part. Everybody here loves the Rosanna Shuffle, I'm sure.
Yes!
And so there's so many variations of how you can play that swing, but I'll show you something that's in the middle, and also something that I quite enjoy playing, this would be more the in-between feel. So that's kind of a second line New Orleans feel, a place where that sort of shows up in Rosanna, with not as much of an emphasis on that swing, but the rhythm itself and the piano solo at the end of the song, which we'll get into in a minute. The piano's bum, 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 da, 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 dum, ba, da, da, dum. That's a very New Orleans thing that would be based on that, second line. But it's not. One is much sharper in its rhythm than the other, and that in-between thing has a very specific feel. The other side, the complete opposite side, would be that same pattern of 16th. to me, those variations of that swing and having the ability to play through those and get your body and the physics of the stick and hand learning by playing along with music that has that feel. There's a certain shape and tension into your kind of own resisting of your stroke that gets that in between. So that's all sort of where I know from knowing David Page and those guys, sort of the origin of where that feel was. They wanted that New Orleans thing on that outro. So that has everything to do with everything that we'll go through and play and demonstrate today. For me, is the nuance of how you interpret that 16th or triplet swing to a groove. I particularly, unless it's very specific kinds of music, like maybe punk, like where things are very rigid. That's about the only thing that I would play that's that rigidly a straight eighth note. And it's stylistically appropriate to that kind of music because there's an intensity and a tension to pushing forward that's strictly without dynamics. Now, that's the other component when you're getting into the signature of your feel, is learning to control the instrument at different velocities. Getting that information into your hands so that you're not just playing based on what is the most comfortable way, physical stroke that you play with. You want to be able to play the same rhythm and the same feeling, whether you're playing loud or whether you're playing soft, And that requires, for me, it requires a lot of the work that I spent there and my development as a player was much more than what I spent working out like technically complicated things. I spent 90% of my effort as a musician was controlling my dynamics and being able to play quiet, and being able to play loud and have the same feel, where I had to play one time with a symphony, right? And I'm on stage right in the middle of all the violins and the whole symphony. I'm right in the middle. Can't have any microphones. You could hear a pin drop in that room, and I'm playing. Do you guys know who the Doobie Brothers are? Yeah. Right? So you're playing, let's just say, Taking It to the Streets. Do you guys know that song? Or maybe Minute by Minute. You guys know that one? Right? So I'm having to play this quiet. Barely touching the drums and still be able to get this feel. And you can probably hear this in the room. One thing, the way, for me, when you play light and soft, you also get different lengths of notes out of the drums. So if I'm playing soft, even when I was playing that harder or lower on the bass drum, if I'm still able to play the same relationships of quiet to loud, even if the whole thing is like pianissimo, very, very quiet, you'll hear the bass drum make different lengths of notes. So I'm always playing to the drum and tuning in a certain way and approaching the drum to be able to get that kind of complexity out of something simple, you know, so that there is music and movement inside a repetitive thing, you know, so that it's not just very, you know, there's a feeling every measure, every bar to bar.